My parents purposefully kicked me from my sister's wedding after an 18-hour flight. 3 days later, they begged me to send them a $38,000 wire. I flew 18 hours from Singapore to Seattle for my little sister Ava's wedding. I hadn't been home in almost 3 years. Between work, visa issues, and the cost of traveling, video calls had become the closest thing to family gatherings. When Ava called to tell me she was getting married, she asked if I'd walk her down the aisle because Dad's knee had been bothering him. I booked my ticket that night. It cost nearly $4,000 after changing work schedules and buying a last-minute flight. I didn't hesitate. She was my sister. While I waited for my luggage after landing, Mom texted me, "Take an Uber straight to the hotel instead of coming home." It felt odd, but weddings are hectic, so I didn't think much of it. At the hotel, the receptionist frowned after checking the computer. "I'm sorry, sir. Your reservation was canceled yesterday. There has to be a mistake." She turned the monitor toward me. The cancellation had come from my mother's phone number. I called Mom immediately. "Oh, about that," she said. "What do you mean?" "We think it's better if you don't come." I honestly thought she was joking. "What? Your future brother-in-law's family is very traditional, and they asked about you. They weren't comfortable that you've never married and live overseas. We don't want unnecessary questions." I stared at my suitcase. "So you're kicking me out because strangers might gossip?" "It's only one day," she replied quietly. "Please don't make this harder." One day, after an 18-hour flight, after spending thousands of dollars, after my own sister asked me to be there, I called Ava. She didn't answer. An hour later, she texted, "I'm sorry. Mom said this would keep the peace." That hurt more than anything else. I found another hotel and spent the next 2 days wandering around Seattle alone. On the wedding day, photos filled social media. My parents smiled beside Ava. Everyone looked happy. There wasn't a single empty seat where I should have been. The next morning, I changed my return flight and flew back to Singapore without seeing any of them. 3 days after I got home, Dad called. His voice sounded unusually cheerful. "How's work?" I waited. "We need your help." The wedding had gone far over budget. My parents had promised vendors they would cover expensive upgrades, but one of Dad's investments collapsed before the ceremony. They suddenly needed a $38,000 wire transfer before several large payments came due. "You've always done well overseas," Dad said. "It's only temporary." I almost laughed. "You mean temporary, like canceling my hotel?" Silence. Mom took the phone. "We already apologized." No, they hadn't. They had only said they were sorry. I felt hurt. Dad finally spoke again. "We're family." I looked around my apartment. For years, everyone back home joked that I'd abandoned the family to chase money overseas. Funny how distance only stopped mattering when they needed my bank account. "I'll think about it," I said. Later that afternoon, I called Ava. She answered immediately. "I knew they'd ask." "You knew?" "They've been talking about asking you since before the wedding." I stayed quiet. "They assumed you'd help no matter what happened." That sentence explained everything. I wasn't their son. I was their emergency fund. "I should have stopped them," Ava whispered. "You could have." "I know." The next day, Dad sent wiring instructions. Then another message. Then another. Mom texted photos of unpaid invoices. My uncle called, followed by my aunt. Apparently, I was selfish for letting my parents struggle over what everyone called one misunderstanding. Not one person mentioned my 18-hour flight, or the canceled hotel, or being excluded from my own sister's wedding. Instead of replying, I contacted the reception venue myself. The manager confirmed there was still money owed, but nobody had threatened legal action. My parents simply wanted the balance paid sooner than required. That made me curious. I hired an attorney in Seattle to review something I'd never questioned before. Years earlier, my grandmother had left me a small rental property. Since I lived overseas, my parents managed it for me. The attorney reviewed the records. Within 2 weeks, he found missing rental income, inflated maintenance expenses, and lease payments that had never reached my account. The total came to just under $46,000. Interesting number. He sent my parents a formal demand letter requesting repayment and complete financial records. Dad called within minutes. "What is this?" "My property. We managed it for you. You also kept my money. We needed it. We're family." So was I. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Within a week, they somehow found enough money to repay every missing dollar. Not because they wanted to, because the attorney made it clear the next step would be court. A few days later, Dad texted again. "So, about the wedding bills." I transferred exactly $0. Instead, I emailed him a spreadsheet showing every recovered rent payment beside the amount they'd asked me to wire. At the bottom, I wrote one sentence: "We're even." He never replied.